What's up, everyone? Tony from the Cold Case Project, back again. And today, what I want to run with you over is all content shared in these videos is readily available in any Google search. Now, with that said, I take this content, have it rewritten, and upon rewriting it, put it in these videos to spread the word on the thousands and thousands of cold cases of men and women throughout the United States that are just forgotten, and I give this platform to them so their cases and their stories can be told. Now, in addition to that, if you look down below in the description, you're going to see some brand new t-shirt and coffee cup designs I've actually gotten from a couple of my subscribers who have over the years have been giving me some awesome fan art. So with that said, I'm offering a 20% discount code down below if you check that out, and splitting proceeds with them because they are awesome. Been watching me for quite some time, and I definitely think they deserve to be rewarded for some of the work they do on top of being full-time employees also. So once again, if you have any recommendations or any suggestions, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the video. Like, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.
Franklin Thomas Gotchalk was last seen at his Mason, Michigan residence on February 2nd, 1997, the day before his 25th birthday. He had been an English major at Michigan State University and was within 3 credits of graduating, but he did not register for classes for the spring semester of 1997. On the day of his disappearance, he drove off in his brother's car without permission and has never been heard from again. Gotchalk's brother's vehicle, a black and red 1977 Oldsmobile Tornado Trofeo with a Michigan license plate number MXD164, was later found abandoned in a parking lot at the corner of Grand River Avenue and Cedar Street in Lansing, Michigan. This location, about 14 miles southeast of his home in Mason, became the focal point of the investigation. However, there was no immediate sign of Franklin at the scene. Shortly after his disappearance, 2 cyclists discovered 2 duffel bags belonging to Gotchalk on the Shiawassee Street Bridge over the Grand River. This bridge was near where his brother's vehicle was abandoned. Authorities examined the bags and found that only a few items were missing: Gotchalk's black leather jacket, his Detroit Lions coat, his wallet, and a watch with a brown leather band, which had been a gift from his mother. Adding to the mystery, his Detroit Lions coat was later found in a local cornfield, though the details of its discovery remain unclear. Investigators feared that Gotchalk might have ended up in the Grand River, and a comprehensive search was launched. The Ingham County Sheriff's Department deployed a dive team, scouring the waters for weeks. The river, which had experienced recent flooding, was moving faster than usual, leading authorities to suspect that if Franklin had entered the water, his body might have been carried downstream. Despite their efforts, divers found no conclusive evidence linking the river to his disappearance. A police search dog, a German shepherd named Jack, was brought to the scene to assist in the search. Jack specialized in locating human remains in water and underground, and he indicated several points of interest along the riverbank. However, the searches of these areas yielded no new clues. The river search spanned from the Shiawassee Street Bridge to a nearby railroad bridge south of Saginaw Street, covering approximately 54 miles, but it ultimately led to a dead end. The Lansing State Journal reported that during the search, a diver recovered a watch and a knife, though it was unclear whether they were connected to Gotchalk's case. Gotchalk's disappearance left his family devastated and confused. His parents, David and Adeline Gotchalk, stated that it was completely out of character for Franklin to leave without telling anyone. He was a passionate public speaker with aspirations of becoming a teacher, and despite his battle with depression, his family did not believe he would simply walk away from his life without contacting them. Investigators considered several possible explanations for Franklin's disappearance. Voluntary disappearance. Another theory suggests that Franklin may have left voluntarily to start a new life. His failure to register for his final college semester, coupled with his apparent distress, raised questions about whether he had planned his disappearance. However, his family strongly disputed this notion, arguing that he would not have vanished without a trace. Foul play. The most troubling possibility is that Gotchalk was the victim of foul play. The fact that his Detroit Lions coat was found in a cornfield suggests that someone else may have been involved. Could he have met with someone who had ill intentions? If so, why? Investigators have never publicly disclosed whether any forensic evidence was found on the coat, the car, or his duffel bags. Adding another layer of mystery, a potential sighting of Franklin was reported on February 22, 1997. A witness claimed to have seen a man matching his description near Okemos and Jolly Roads, but it is unclear whether this sighting was ever verified. Numerous tips were called in over the months following his disappearance, but none led to a breakthrough in the case. To this day, Franklin Gotchalk remains missing. Despite the exhaustive search efforts and years of investigation, no solid leads have emerged. If he is still alive, he would be 52 years old today. His case is classified as an endangered missing person, and foul play is suspected. Those with any information regarding his disappearance are urged to contact the Ingham County Sheriff's Department at 517-676-2431. Phyllis Flynn was born on May 7, 1965, and spent her early years growing up in a modest home on Grant Street in Lincoln Park, Michigan. She was known as a free-spirited young woman, but nothing about her suggested that she would one day become the subject of a decades-long mystery. The details of her disappearance remain shrouded in uncertainty, leaving her siblings desperate for answers, even 34 years later. On May 7, 1988, Phyllis celebrated her 23rd birthday surrounded by her family. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter, and there was no indication that this night would mark her final moments with her loved ones. As the festivities wound down, Phyllis made a request that, in hindsight, carried eerie significance. She asked her father to drop her off at Hotel Yorba, a location in southwest Detroit known for its transient clientele. She explained that she wanted to visit her boyfriend, Albert Jimenez, a man her family had never met and knew virtually nothing about. They had no idea how old he was, what he looked like, or what kind of life he led. Her father, likely unaware of the implications, drove her to the hotel and left her there. Days passed, and on May 13th, Phyllis called home. She asked her parents to pick her up from Hotel Yorba. Her father, without hesitation, drove back to the location to retrieve her. However, upon arrival, he was met by two unidentified men standing at the entrance of the hotel. They informed him that Phyllis was gone. She had left. The sudden change in circumstances was perplexing. Why would Phyllis call for a ride and then vanish? Who were these two men, and what was their connection to her? Despite the odd nature of her disappearance, her family was initially not alarmed. Phyllis had a history of disappearing for short periods, and because of this, authorities were slow to act. A few weeks passed before her family truly began to worry, especially when she failed to attend her sister's going-away party. Her sister was moving to Arizona for a new job, and the two were close. It was unlike Phyllis to miss something that significant. Alarmed, her family contacted the police. However, it took weeks of persistence before the authorities agreed to open a missing persons case. By then, crucial time had been lost, time that could have been used to track down Phyllis's last known whereabouts and interview witnesses. The investigation into her disappearance was poorly handled from the start. Despite the fact that her alleged boyfriend, Albert Jimenez, had been living at Hotel Yorba for nearly 2 years, from 1987 until he reportedly checked out in January 1989, there is little evidence to suggest that law enforcement made significant efforts to locate or question him. Given that he was still at the hotel for nearly 9 months after Phyllis went missing, it raises serious questions. What, if anything, did police do during that time to investigate his potential involvement? Adding to the mystery, no one knows who the two men at the hotel entrance were on the night Phyllis's father arrived to pick her up. Were they associated with Albert? Were they hotel staff? Did they have any role in her disappearance? These questions have never been answered, and no records exist of any meaningful police interviews regarding these individuals. To make matters worse, the original detective assigned to Phyllis's case seemingly left no trace of any investigative efforts. Her family has no idea what steps, if any, were taken to find her. The original missing persons report itself is missing, further complicating efforts to retrace what was done in those crucial early days and weeks. Albert Jimenez himself remains an enigma. He was reportedly from Jamaica, but even that detail is uncertain. There are no known records of him in the U.S. following Phyllis's disappearance. If law enforcement attempted to track him down, their efforts were never made public. Was he questioned before he left the hotel? Did he leave willingly, or did he vanish under suspicious circumstances? Did he have anything to do with Phyllis's disappearance, or could he have also met a mysterious fate? Given that Hotel Yorba was a functioning business at the time, it seems improbable that no one could provide any information about Albert Jimenez. He lived there for 2 years. Surely he interacted with hotel staff, maintenance workers, or long-term residents. Standard hotel policy would have required him to provide identification upon check-in, yet his identity seems to have faded into obscurity. Phyllis's disappearance is particularly tragic because it could have been preventable. While resources in 1988 were not what they are today, there were still investigative methods that should have been used but weren't. No one knows if Phyllis simply walked away from her life, met with foul play, or if there is an entirely different explanation. The years have not been kind to Phyllis's case. Her parents have since passed away without ever knowing what happened to their daughter. Her siblings, now living in Arizona, continue to hope for answers, though the likelihood of closure seems distant. Whether Phyllis is alive and living somewhere under an assumed identity or met a tragic fate decades ago, her case remains one of Michigan's longest-standing missing person mysteries. Someone somewhere knows something. Perhaps a former employee of Hotel Yorba remembers Albert Jimenez. Maybe someone who lived in the area in 1988 recalls seeing something unusual. Even a minor recollection could be the key to unlocking a decades-old mystery. Phyllis Flynn was last seen at Hotel Yorba on May 7th, 1988. She was 23 years old. She stood between 5 feet 0 inches and 5 feet 3 inches, weighing approximately 115 pounds, with brown hair and hazel eyes. She may have had blonde streaks in her hair and sometimes wore glasses. She also used the alias names Phyllis Abdul and Linda and Flynn. If you have any information regarding Phyllis Flynn's disappearance, please contact the appropriate authorities. Time has not erased her story, and the truth is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. It was supposed to be a simple Thanksgiving visit, just 11 days away from campus before returning to her nursing studies. But when 19-year-old Jasmine Moody stepped off that plane in Detroit on November 25th, 2014, she was walking into a mystery that would haunt her family for nearly a decade. This is the story of a promising young woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind unanswered questions and a heartbroken family searching for closure. Jasmine Moody grew up between Atlanta and Fort Worth, the kind of young woman who made her mother proud every single day. She wasn't just book smart. Though she did maintain straight A's at Texas Woman's University, she was the sort of person who filled rooms with energy. When she danced, people stopped to watch. When she committed to ROTC training at just 19 years old, she did so with the same determination that earned her a spot on the honor roll. Her mother, Felicia Nichols, describes their relationship as unshakably close. They spoke every day without fail, sharing details about classes, friends, and Jasmine's dreams of becoming a military nurse. That's why when Jasmine mentioned flying to Detroit to visit a friend named Brittany Gurley for Thanksgiving break, Felicia listened carefully to that mother's intuition telling her something felt wrong. Jasmine had met Brittany Gurley online earlier in 2014. The exact nature of their relationship remains unclear. Brittany would later insist they were romantically involved, while Jasmine's family maintains they were simply friends. What we do know is that Jasmine, ever the trusting soul, boarded that flight to Detroit excited for her holiday adventure. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. Phone calls home, updates about her visit, all the usual check-ins. Then came December 4th, the night before Jasmine's scheduled return flight to Texas. According to Brittany's account, she and Jasmine had a heated argument that evening. The details of that fight remain murky, but the aftermath would become the focal point of a missing persons investigation that continues to this day. Brittany claims Jasmine stormed out of the house wearing only a hoodie and jeans, no coat, no shoes, no purse, no phone, into the freezing Detroit night. She says she followed moments later, but found no trace of Jasmine. The story raises immediate questions. Why would a college student visiting an unfamiliar city voluntarily leave behind every single possession? Why wouldn't she take her phone to call for help if she was upset? And most puzzling of all, why wouldn't she contact her mother, with whom she spoke every single day without fail? When Jasmine failed to board her flight home the next day, her mother knew something was terribly wrong. The phone calls to Brittany's house began, calls that were met with excuses and evasions. It took days before Felicia could get straight answers about her daughter's disappearance. Police investigation revealed disturbing inconsistencies in Brittany's story. Initially, she claimed to have tracked Jasmine's phone to a house 3 doors down. Yet when officers executed a search warrant, they found Jasmine's phone still inside Brittany's home. The winter coat Jasmine would have needed in freezing temperatures, still hanging in the closet. Her purse with identification, left on the table. All her packed luggage, exactly where she'd left it. Neighbors reported seeing no sign of Jasmine that night. Surveillance cameras in the area captured nothing. It was as if the vibrant, ambitious young woman had simply vanished in a thin air. In the years since that cold December night, Felicia Nichols has become both grieving mother and determined investigator. She's hired private detectives, organized search parties, and pleaded with media outlets to keep Jasmine's story alive. The lack of answers has been agonizing. People don't just disappear, Felicia says in interviews, her voice equal parts steel and sorrow. Especially not someone like Jasmine. She had too much to live for, too many people who loved her. Somebody knows what happened to my baby. The Detroit Police Department initially treated the case as a possible runaway situation, but as years passed with no activity on Jasmine's social media, no financial transactions, no sightings whatsoever, their assessment shifted. This was no voluntary disappearance. With no body and no crime scene evidence, investigators have been forced to consider every possibility. One theory suggests the argument between Jasmine and Brittany turned physical, resulting in an accidental death that was then covered up. Supporters of this theory point to Brittany's shifting stories and the complete lack of evidence that Jasmine ever left that house alive. Another possibility is that Jasmine did leave the house in distress and fell victim to Detroit streets. The neighborhood where Brittany lived had high crime rates, and a young woman wandering alone at night would have been vulnerable. Yet this doesn't explain why none of her belongings were taken or why there were no sightings. The most haunting theory of all, that Jasmine never left that house alive that night, that her remains are hidden somewhere only her killer knows. Jasmine Moody's case grows colder with each passing year, but her family refuses to give up hope for answers. She was last seen wearing University of Texas hoodie and blue jeans, standing 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing approximately 130 pounds. If you have any information, no matter how insignificant it may seem, please contact Detroit Police Department's Missing Persons Unit, 596-1616, Crime Stoppers Anonymous Tip Line, 1-800-SPEAK. Up, Jasmine Moody should be 29 years old today. She should be a nurse, maybe serving her country, certainly still dancing. Instead, her family waits, her story untold, her fate unknown. In a world where people don't just disappear, someone must know the truth. If that someone is you, please find the courage to come forward. A mother deserves to bring her daughter home. Joe and Garr was last seen in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, on November 24th, 1971. As the Thanksgiving holiday approached, Joanne's absence was noted by those closest to her. She failed to attend holiday celebrations and did not reach out to her loved ones. However, it wasn't until December 31st that she was officially reported missing. More than a month had passed, and in that time, any potential leads or clues had grown cold. Joanne had recently married her second husband, Philip Garr. The couple had been together for less than a year when she disappeared. Philip later told authorities that Joanne had briefly left him but then returned home in late 1971. According to him, she packed her bags and left again soon after. He claimed he had no idea where she went and could not recall the exact date he last saw her. The last confirmed communication Joanne had was with her first husband, Robert Ross, with whom she shared 2 young daughters. On November 24th, she called Robert and arranged to meet him early the next morning. The plan was for Joanne to take the children to see a parade in downtown Detroit. However, she never arrived for the meeting. That same day, a female friend had invited her over for Thanksgiving dinner, but Joanne never showed up there either. She had worked as a secretary at High Grade Food Products Corp. In Southfield, Michigan, for 6 years. Her absence from work was assumed to be a resignation, and her belongings were eventually packed up and mailed to her home. However, the package was returned undelivered and later discarded. By late December, Joanne's mother became increasingly worried. She had not heard from her daughter in weeks, and her unease intensified. She reached out to Philip for answers. Initially, he told her that Joanne was visiting a friend in Ohio. Later, he changed his story, saying she had gone to Illinois. Eventually, he claimed that Joanne had packed her things and left him with another man who was waiting in a car with Ohio license plates. He insisted he had no further knowledge of her whereabouts. Joanne's mother, aware of the troubling signs in her daughter's life, reported her missing. There were indications of domestic abuse. Family members and friends had noticed Joanne with black eyes and bruises. Though she dismissed these injuries as accidental, suspicions remained. Philip, when questioned about their marriage, said the issues between them stemmed from Joanne's jealousy. Despite the concerning circumstances, the case did not gain much traction. Authorities were dealing with a missing persons report filed over a month after Joanne's disappearance, making it difficult to gather fresh evidence. There is no trace of Joanne, no record of her departure, and no proof of where she may have gone. Over the years, theories about her fate have surfaced, but without definitive evidence, her case remains unsolved. Philip Garr's shifting explanations and the physical injuries noted by those around her have led many to suspect foul play. However, no charges have ever been filed in connection with her disappearance. Joanne's daughters, who were left without a mother at a young age, continue to seek answers. Now, in their later years, they still hold onto the hope that they might one day learn the truth about what happened to her. Decades have passed since Joanne Garr vanished. Her case remains one of Michigan's enduring mysteries. Was she truly picked up by an unknown man and left to start a new life elsewhere? Or did something more sinister occur behind closed doors? Until new evidence emerges or someone comes forward with the truth, Joanne Garr's fate will remain a haunting question, lingering in the memories of those who loved her. It was the early morning hours of December 26, 1991, when 23-year-old Bernice Gray began her day as usual. She dropped her 1-year-old daughter off at a daycare center in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, just as she had countless times before. After saying goodbye to her child, she left the center and drove west on Gordon Street. It was around 6:30 a.m. She was never seen again. Shortly after Gray's departure, witnesses in the area reported hearing a noise that sounded like a firecracker. The sound, seemingly inconsequential at the time, would later take on a sinister significance. Gray was a diligent and punctual worker. She was expected at her job as a medical records clerk by 8 a.m. However, when she failed to arrive, her boss grew concerned. By 8:34 a.m., her employer had already attempted to contact her boyfriend, Robert William Pan, leaving a voicemail. Pan, the father of Gray's child, returned the call, claiming that Bernice had stayed at her mother's house the previous night and may have simply overslept. The explanation seemed odd. Gray's employer then called her mother, who, unsurprisingly, had no knowledge of her whereabouts. Panic began to set in. 4 days later, on December 30th, Gray's blue Pontiac 6000 was discovered abandoned on East Lawn Street near Mack Avenue in Detroit. The scene was chilling. The vehicle was unlocked, its keys carelessly discarded on the floor, and the driver's side window was slightly rolled down. Inside, investigators found Gray's wallet, her identification, several boxes, and a car seat for her young daughter. The ashtray held cigarette butts, Marlboro Lights, her preferred brand, but what stood out most was what else was found in the car. 2 spent .25 caliber bullet casings, and 1 bullet lay on the front seat, and blood, Gray's blood, was pooled on the passenger seat, spattered onto the window, the windshield, and even the driver's side sun visor. A blood spatter expert later testified that the evidence was consistent with a person being shot in the head from behind or from the side while seated in the driver's seat. The shooter, they surmised, could have then moved Gray's body onto the passenger seat, slid into the driver's seat, and driven away. From the very beginning, authorities had a prime suspect, Robert Pan. The relationship between Pan and Gray had begun in 1987, intensifying quickly as they moved in together. However, their time together was marked by volatility. By 1990, Gray had taken steps toward independence, applying for low-income housing. Though she initially changed her mind, by September 1991, she was desperate to leave. When she called the Housing Commission again, she explicitly requested priority placement, citing domestic violence as the reason. Her claims were not unfounded. That summer, Pan had thrown her out of their home with barely any clothes on her back. Her grandmother had to retrieve her. By the fall, she had finally moved out for good, taking their daughter and settling in with her mother. But, despite her physical departure, the relationship remained complicated. She continued to see Pan, though tensions were brewing. On December 24th, just 2 days before she vanished, Pan had proposed marriage. She rejected him. That night, Gray confided in a friend. She was upset, shaken. Pan had not taken the rejection well. He had threatened to kill her, she said, adding ominously that he assured her there would be no custody battle over their child. It was clear to those closest to her that she was trying to break free, but also that she was terrified of what Pan might do. Christmas came and went. By midnight, Pan had left Gray's mother's house after yet another argument. It was the last known interaction before she disappeared the following morning. In the hours after Gray's disappearance, Pan's behavior raised red flags. He returned the engagement ring he had bought for her, tracking mud and dirt into the jewelry store. Later that evening, he spoke with Gray's uncle, appearing exhausted. Strangely, he claimed to know that Gray was dead. When questioned about his whereabouts that day, he gave conflicting accounts. He first claimed he had spent the morning doing an emergency repair in an accountant's office, digging a 9-foot hole by hand, because using tools would have cracked the sidewalk. However, the accountant later contradicted this, stating that the repair was routine and that he had paid Pan $225 for fixing a crack in the basement wall. As suspicions mounted, Pan attempted to downplay his past threats against Gray, insisting that he had never meant to hurt her. He admitted he might have considered kidnapping their daughter if a custody battle arose, but nothing beyond that. But authorities weren't convinced. They already knew Pan had a violent history. He had a criminal record spanning at least a dozen offenses, including an attempted murder charge against his ex-wife, who had accused him of repeated abuse. In that instance, Pan had hidden in the back seat of her car, attacking her while she was driving, eerily similar to what investigators believe had happened to Gray. Though Gray's body was never found, prosecutors built a strong circumstantial case against Pan. They theorized that he had attacked her while she was stopped at an intersection, shooting her twice in the head before disposing of her body. He had even told acquaintances about a so-called perfect crime, a murder without a body, where the crime could never be proven. In 2000, authorities finally arrested Pan for Gray's murder. His response? He demanded to know who had snitched on him. His trial lasted weeks, with the jury deliberating for 13 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though justice was served in the courtroom, one question remained unanswered. Where was Bernice Gray's body? By January 1995, Gray had been declared legally dead, with her presumed date of death listed as December 26, 1991, the day she vanished. Despite extensive searches, her remains were never located. Her family, friends, and daughter, now an adult, are left with only memories and the lingering uncertainty of where she was laid to rest. On the evening of February 26, 2001, 30-year-old Afferta Jerge vanished under suspicious circumstances in Auburn Hills, Michigan. The last confirmed sighting of her was at the Showcase Cinema's parking lot on Opdyke Road, where she had arranged to meet her ex-husband, Binacola Jerge, and their children at 7 o'clock p.m. That meeting would mark the last time anyone would see Afferta alive. Surveillance footage from the parking lot captured Afferta arriving at the designated meeting spot. She exited her light blue Ford Escort and entered another vehicle. The recording showed her remaining in the car for about half an hour before it drove away, with her still inside. She was never heard from again. When Afferta failed to show up for work at the boutique she managed in Troy, Michigan, her family became alarmed. She was a responsible and dedicated employee, not someone who would simply abandon her job without notice. Afferta's vehicle was found at the Showcase Cinema's parking lot, exactly where she had left it. Inside, police discovered her purse and cell phone, along with a single unfired round from her personal handgun. However, the gun itself was missing. It was an ominous sign that suggested she might have met with violence. Afferta had married Jerge in 1987, but their relationship had been turbulent. They separated in 1996, and Binac filed for divorce in 1998. Though they shared legal custody of their children, physical custody had been awarded to Binac. Afferta had been seeking greater access to her children, and this had reportedly led to threats from Binac. According to those close to her, he had warned her that if she tried to take the children away from him, he would kill her. Shortly after Afferta's disappearance, Binac abruptly fled the United States, leaving his children behind. He relocated to Kosovo, the region in southeastern Europe where he was originally from. Despite his disappearance, in 2002, Michigan authorities charged him with felony assault related to an alleged domestic violence incident against Afferta in 1998. However, attempts to extradite him failed. Kosovo's government refused to send him back to the United States to face prosecution. For years, Afferta's case remained stalled, with her family desperately seeking answers and justice. Then, in March 2011, a significant development occurred. Binac was arrested in Kosovo on a warrant for Afferta's murder. However, history repeated itself. Kosovo once again refused to extradite him, and he was released from custody just 3 months later, in June 2011. It wasn't until June 2019 that Binac was arrested once more in Kosovo, again on charges related to Afferta's murder. This time, there was renewed hope that he might finally be brought to the United States to face justice. Kosovo had, for the first time in its history, extradited another fugitive to the U.S., raising the possibility that they would do the same with Binac. But before that could happen, he took matters into his own hands. While still in the custody of Kosovar authorities, Binac was found dead in a jail bathroom, having hanged himself. Despite the charges against Binac and his subsequent suicide, Afferta's body has never been found. The lack of physical remains has left lingering questions about the precise circumstances of her disappearance and presumed death. Officially, she has been declared legally dead, but her family still holds out hope that her remains will one day be located so they can lay her to rest properly. The case remains classified as unsolved, with foul play suspected. For Afferta's loved ones, there is no closure, only the haunting uncertainty of what exactly happened on that February night in 2001. Investigators still urge anyone with information to come forward, as even the smallest detail could help shed light on the truth. If you have any information regarding Afferta Jerge's disappearance, you're encouraged to contact the Auburn Hills Police Department at 248-370-9444 or the Oakland County Sheriff Department at 248-858-0692. On September 22, 1998, the day after her 14th birthday, Coral Hall vanished from Flint, Michigan, leaving behind a haunting mystery that would take over a decade to unravel. Coral lived in an apartment on Ann Arbor Street with her grandmother, Lois Arlene Yanish, and Yanish's boyfriend, Bruce Strait. Their home life was fraught with instability, marked by poverty, substance abuse, and allegations of neglect and mistreatment. Coral had been raised by Yanish from an early age after her mother was deemed unfit to care for her. Her mother, who struggled with drug addiction, died of an overdose in 1996. Coral never knew her father, and her younger half-sister was raised separately in foster care. The two girls had last seen each other at their mother's funeral. On the day she disappeared, Coral had gone to the Michigan Department of Human Services with a friend, Melissa Pierce, to report that she was being abused at home. Coral was desperate to escape her situation, and later that night, she called Pierce from a payphone near the White Horse Tavern, pleading for help. She told Pierce she needed to leave Flint and asked if she could come live with her. Unfortunately, Pierce was out of town at the time. By the time she and her uncle arrived in Flint hours later to pick Coral up, the girl had vanished without a trace. Despite searching for her, they found no sign of her. Initially, investigators treated Coral's disappearance as a runaway case. She had been skipping school, rebelling against her grandmother's strict rules, and associating with older drug users. Authorities considered the possibility that she had traveled to Los Angeles with an adult boyfriend, a theory that persisted for years despite the disturbing allegations surrounding her home life. The Michigan DHS had investigated Yanish multiple times for abuse and medical neglect. According to testimony, Coral endured severe mistreatment at the hands of her grandmother and her grandmother's boyfriend. One man, who was in his mid-20s at the time, admitted to regularly smoking crack cocaine with Coral and claimed that Yanish had offered him alone time with her in exchange for drugs. Coral often had bruises and other injuries, which she said were the result of her grandmother's abuse. Bruce Strait, a convicted felon, had recently been released from prison before Coral vanished. Coral had accused him of sexual abuse, and he allegedly told others he would not return to prison because of her allegations. He died of alcohol-related complications in 2000, taking whatever secrets he had with him. For over a decade, Coral's case remained a mystery, and she was listed as a missing person. But behind the scenes, investigators had never ruled out foul play. Suspicion had always lingered over Yanish, whose inconsistent statements and erratic behavior fueled their concerns. By 2011, police had reopened the case, and they began interrogating Yanish again. During questioning in 2011 and 2012, she reportedly made a chilling admission. Coral was dead. She allegedly confessed that she had beaten her granddaughter to death with a hammer and that she and Strait had disposed of the body. However, she changed her story multiple times, recanting, altering details, and providing conflicting accounts. Despite the lack of a body or physical evidence, authorities believed they had enough to charge Yanish with murder. In July 2013, she was arrested and charged with her granddaughter's killing. Prosecutors theorized that Coral's accusations against Strait may have been a catalyst for the murder and that Yanish, a heavy drug user, had reached a breaking point. Facing the prospect of a lengthy trial, Yanish eventually took a plea deal in September 2015, pleading no contest to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Given her advanced age, she was already 75 at the time of sentencing, there was a strong possibility that she would never live long enough to be released. To this day, Coral's body has never been found. What truly happened to her in the hours after she called Melissa Pierce from that payphone remains a terrifying unknown. Somewhere, Perhaps buried in an unmarked grave or hidden in a place only Yanish and Straight knew, are the remains of a young girl who fought desperately to escape a life of neglect and abuse.